and I'm now going to introduce our guest speaker and provide a little bit about her background, Riva Lehrer. So Ms. Riva Lehrer, she did a nice little wave for us. Thank you, Riva, is an artist, writer, and curator who focuses on the socially challenged body. She is best known for representations of people whose physical embodiment, sexuality, or gender identity have long been stigmatized. Ms. Lehner's work has been seen in venues, including the National Portrait Gallery of the Smithsonian, Yale University, the United Nations, the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C., the Arnott Museum, the de Cordova Museum, the Friar Museum, the Chicago Cultural Center, and the State of Illinois Museum. Her awards include the 2017 Three Arts McDowell Fellowship for Writing, the 2015 Three Arts Residency Fellowship at the University of Illinois, the 2014 Carnegie Mellon Fellowship at Haverford and Bryn Mawr Colleges, the 2009 Prairie Fellowship at the Ragdale Foundation. Her grants include the 2009 Critical Fierceness Grant, the 2008 Three Arts Foundation Grant, and the 2006 Wynne Newhouse Award for Excellence, New York City, as well as grants from the Illinois Arts Council, the University of Illinois, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Her memoir, Golem Girl, has been published by the One World imprint of Penguin/Random House in October of 2020. Ms. Lehrer is represented by Regal Hoffman and Associates Literacy Agency in New York City. And Ms. Lehrer is on faculty at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and she is an instructor in the Medical Humanities Department of Northwestern University. And we now have her memoir available and accessible through the Molloy University Jet Library as an ebook. And we're going to include a link to her website so we can further check in on her artwork, writing, and advocacy at the end of this recording. And I'm now going to turn the virtual mic over to Riva so she can do a little bit of a virtual reading for us. Thank you so much, Riva.
Well, thank you for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. The view thing is being unhelpful. Let's try this. Somehow you got my old bio, so you're teaching me I need to update my paperwork. Anyway, also make it much shorter. So hi everyone. I see that there are just a few people on video. I'm gonna, I think I'm just gonna go to speaker view for the moment, which is still not showing me. I'm here though, I assume. Forgive me, I am extremely sleep deprived, so I'm not at my most bushy-tailed. So you're seeing me like after, I don't know, a hard weekend. It's not what happened, but let's pretend I had a really fabulous, hard, and story-worthy weekend instead of just being sick. So given that it is Hanukkah in a couple of days, I thought I would read to you from a chapter called House of Wax that sort of goes to not just my family relationships, but my early sense of self as different. So let me try and get to that reading. Okay. I'm going to put on my fabulous reading glasses. Costume change. Ta-da. So what you need to know is that it's 1968. I'm 10 years old and it's the week before Hanukkah. I've come in from my bedroom because I hear the sound of mom's sewing machine and she's making a new dress for the holidays. So this is an edit of that chapter. House of Wax. My mother had wanted to be a fashion designer. She'd won a scholarship to Pratt Institute, but her parents demanded that she attend pharmacy school. She escaped after a year by virtue of a lab accident involving a Bunsen burner and a quantity of magnesium. She flash blinded herself, a blindness that lasted for several months. Who knows if Carol was a chemistry genius or a future liability for the pharmaceutical industry. Carol loved clothing with an unrequited passion, even considering that the fashion industry pretended that she didn't exist. These days, she consoled herself by drawing wasp-waisted debutantes in Dior new look frocks. I know that some of you guys out there will know what I'm talking about. Anyway, the thing is, she'd never find such things in her size in 1968 because Carol Sue Horwitz took after her father. Sam Horwitz was height times width times girth times appetite, 6'2" at a time when Jewish men were built like Woody Allen. Now, big men could get clothes because big men got respect, but Lane Bryant was the only store that served big women, offering a range of shame-based garments that ran the gamut from drab to saggy to punitively asexual. Now, the dresses my mother made were beautifully cut and daringly anti-Bryantly colorful, graced with embroidery on the collar, tiny jewels at the neck, lace and velvet trim, tiny jewels at the neck, lace and velvet trim at the sleeves and hem. She'd cause a small sensation. Oh, sleep, come back for me. She'd cause a small, what is a sensation? I don't know. Sensation when she swanned down the road in one of her own creations. More than once, I saw a lady grab her sleeve and demand, "Where did you get that? Can I buy it from you? You made it? Oh, God, please make me one." I feared that someday an admirer would peel my mother like a banana and run away clutching the purloined gown like a golden fleece. I thought my mother was very beautiful, but it was hard for her to feel that way. Grandma Fanny had sown landmines along that road years ago. "My God, Carol, I'm surprised your husband hasn't left you already. You look like a chazer. How can you even leave the house?" After one of Fanny's pep talks, Mom wouldn't come out of the bedroom for days. And yet, I suspect that if Carol had been pretty in the same way that Fanny was, Fanny would have never forgiven her for that either. Mom set the menorah on the table and draped her hair with a cloth. She lit the first night candle with the shamus candle, and we prayed, "V'tzivanu l'halik ner shel Chanukah, Amen." Rivulets of pastel wax crept down the arms of the menorah. We passed around the brown kugel, the amber bowls of matzo ball soup, the brisket, the tzimmes, an edible museum of Jewish culture. The finale was Carol Sue Horwitz-Lehrer's famous homemade strudel. There's a whole story about that, let me tell you. When dessert was reduced to microscopic flakes, our parents took pity and said, "Okay, kids," whereupon we bolted to the living room and clawed at the gift wrap like uncaged villachayas. A note, if you look at the written text of the book, you can look up the Yiddish that I am saying. It's not footnoted or italicized. We made a decision not to do either because it's part of the normal way that I think partly in Yiddish. And so we're in the land of Google. So if you're curious, please look up the written text and just put it into Google. Anyway, thank you for your patience. Going back to the story. The small packages were for a little bit of explanation. We had a very long navy blue couch that had this kind of silver thread shot through it. And every year on Hanukkah, my parents would stack 8 separate little piles of gifts, and it went in order from first night to 8th night. And so each little pile was for me and both my brothers. So the small packages were for first night. Hefty 8th night gifts waited at the far end of the couch. I already knew what was inside my big package. For years, I'd been given the same 2-foot by 1-foot box. I was 5 when I got my first Chatty Cathy doll. She'd seemed so big that she could have been my unbending sister, blonde and blue as apple pie. Cathy could talk if I pulled a cord out of the back of her neck. "Will you play with me? Please brush my hair. Carry me. I hurt myself. I'm sleepy. I love you. Kathy sounded like a child gargling hot glue. Like me, Kathy went away for repair, not to children's, but to the doll hospital downtown. Kathy's voice box was actually a tiny record player mounted inside her chest, easily broken during even mildly vigorous play. The girl had cardiac issues, hence the succession of new chatties. I demanded to be taken to see the doll hospital, and I was so disappointed that it was just a tiny storefront on Elm Street with hundreds of dolls wedged inside dusty glass cases. When I was little, Mom had sewn us matching outfits, Mommy dress, Riva dress, and Kathy dress, cut from the same bolted cloth. Now that I was 10, Mom and Grandma had begun buying me A-line shifts that hid my spine. I didn't feel safe. I just felt sad. My dolls had stopped being my companions and had become excuses to make elaborate doll houses instead. Castles made of appliance cartons with Morton salt turrets and corduroy carpeting cut from scraps of my trousers. I was better at loving those houses than loving my perfect pink dolls. Thanks. Okay, let's go back to y'all. Hello. Let's come back. Oh,
Thank you
Zoom.
much, Riva.
Zoom, where art thou?
Oh, can you see us?
Here we are.
Okay.
All right. Technology.
Yes. Thank you so much, Riva, for how descriptive you are in your storytelling of your chapter. I absolutely loved hearing you use, different voices, and really retelling the story was so moving. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who felt that way. We would love now to move into some topics for discussion. We have some topics that we've notated for discussion, but please feel free to use the chat if you have any questions, if you're curious, and I will narrate those questions to Riva. So we're now going to move into some of our topics for discussion. So regarding your memoir, I know you just read a little bit of that for us. We were curious about knowing how is your experience really writing your memoir and really experiencing the reception of your memoir, especially I know it was during 2020, during the pandemic, how might that have affected it all? We were curious to know about your experience of that.
Well, it was awful. It was absolutely awful. I had had a book tour booked. We had sent out galleys and had gotten universally enthusiastic responses. I was going to be in a lot of the major magazines, on television, radio programs, etc. And I had not wanted to publish during the run-up to the election, but what had happened is that we'd had to make decisions early on. And one of the things when COVID happened is that a lot of presses pulled their big books. And the idea was that, they felt that things would not go well trying to launch during COVID. And then there was this giant 180 swing where a lot of the publishers said, oh, but everybody's stuck at home and they're dying for something to read. The bookstore numbers were shooting up, if people remember. And so they decided to reverse course and bring out their books. Now, when my publisher had decided to publish me in October, it was at the point where they said, oh, the publishers have all pulled their big books. So it's a really good time for new authors, smaller projects to get attention. So we thought we were going to be great. So we already put everything in progress. We had talked to all these venues. And then in early September, a few weeks after we had committed to all this, the publishers changed their minds and said, oh, we are going to bring out the big books because people are dying for reading, and we're going to do a lot of things by Zoom. So, for instance, I believe the same day that my book came out, so did Barack Obama's. And so all the venues that had committed to me either said, oh, we have to take care of, there was a lot of interest in 3 topics. One was books about Black Lives Matter, because that was very, very, forefront at the moment. Books about politics, which were doing really well, or books by celebrities. And I didn't qualify as any of those. So we lost every single one of the venues without exception. And a few of them said, well, come back after the election because we can pay attention now. And so we did that, and they all said, oh no, your book's been out for a month. We only review within 2 weeks. So sorry, you're too late. So the book really got stomped, and I've been carrying a lot of sorrow. I've been doing a lot of these events because I'm trying to keep, I don't mean to be so negative, but it was a dreadful time. And as far as I know, it's my only book. I'm writing another, but who knows if it'll get published. And so a lot of authors went through this who came out in 2020, that our books kind of disappeared unless we were Barack Obama. And there aren't very many of people who can say that they are Barack Obama. So that's what happened there. And then, of course, my book tour got canceled because of COVID. And so I've done now over 100 virtual book events since the book came out. This might be my 100th. So thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for being here too, Riva. We're so grateful to have you in our space, and I know I'm so sorry to hear about that awful experience of just that time of looking back on the pandemic and COVID, just and to hear your experience of not being received in that space. So I'm grateful that we can have this virtual space, at least for you to share some of your experiences and talk a little bit about your book and your practice. So thank you for elaborating and sharing that with us in this space. If you're ready, we have another question moving a little bit forward towards some of your art practices that you've implemented and discussed. We were curious regarding some of your self-portraiture. I remember reading that you wrote that portraiture became like a sack of rocks on your back, and I was wondering if you could reflect a little bit on your experience. How has that been with self-portraiture, or maybe discuss a little bit of some portraits that you display in your book?
Well, my self-portraiture is very different than when I work with a collaborator. When I work with a collaborator, I'm basic things on a very strict ethical series of parameters, where I let go of a lot of control. As I've written a lot in the book, my practice is based in ethics, particularly informed consent. And as my practice has moved forward, that's gotten more and more really baked in and more at times extreme. So when I'm working with somebody, I have no idea what's about to happen. And so there's a lot of just literally making space in the image, leaving things blank, leaving things unfinished until I kind of see where my collaborator is going. And to be specific for anyone who hasn't read it, I ask people to work on their portraits, to actually do things like draw on them, write on them, erase things, whatever they want, but to interfere and add to. So there's been quite a range of responses. I wanted people to take responsibility for their own image, and also to recognize the primary thing is recognizing how hard it is to be looked at, particularly if you live in any kind of non-normative body, or a body that's considered to be non-normative, although in actual fact we know that there really are no non-normative bodies, because not only is there a huge range, any body with a morphological variance or behavioral variance, there are a lot of people like you, almost always. You are not going to be the only one of your kind. So it's just you're the only one of your kind in a 6-block radius or something, or among your acquaintances, but you are not the only one like you. So it's a falsehood to be told that you are an outlier, because that's only true up to a point. When I'm doing a self-portrait, a lot of times I want to try something technical. There'll be something I want to work on, some aspect of my life. But a lot of times the genesis is there's something I feel like I haven't been able to do technically, because it would mean taking back control from the people I was working with. So when I do a self-portrait, it's me taking all my control back, and seeing what I want to do with it. They've been good. All the portraits have been good for my ability to survive this world, because they've let me understand what embodiment is, or that's an exaggeration, what the range of embodiments can be. There is no is. I'm sounding like Gertrude Stein, which is not a terrible thing to sound like. Anyway, but what's interesting is the National Portrait Gallery recently put me on a list of something like important Americans. And when they do that, they want a portrait of you. And when you're an artist, they want a self-portrait. And unfortunately, I don't own any of mine anymore. They're all in collection. And so rather than sending them to a collector, I thought, well, what if I do something new? And I had nothing. There was nothing. I think after having done the memoir and a couple of small self-portraits after that, I joke and say, I feel like I carved my tombstone, like I'm done with my life. The book I'm writing right now is not about me, it's fiction. And, but my partner said, well, what about a portrait of us? Because we're a fairly new relationship. And, what if, instead of just about you in relationship, because I've never done a self-portrait that included another person. So we are hoping this spring to start, she lives in a different city, to do a nude together about what our relationship is like. So we'll see if that happens.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us, and definitely sounds like a new experience that you've been describing, that I know we would all be really excited to, view a new self-portrait, and also to, hear a little bit of your new book eventually, of course. Yes, fingers crossed. I had a note in the chat from Jennifer, actually, and she was asking if there was a story behind the cover image, I believe, of your book.
Oh gosh. I don't think I talk about it in the book. It's hard. I just talked and talked and talked. Sometimes I don't remember what's in the book anymore. So I am obviously Jewish, but because I was going for a minor in art history, and my area of concentration originally was Northern Renaissance. And the history of figuration in the West is the history of the Catholic Church, primarily. And so I learned a lot about Catholic iconography over the years. And one of the aspects of Catholic iconography is something called Saint Veronika, the story of Saint Veronika. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard a little bit about Saint Veronika, yes.
So for anyone who doesn't know, Jesus was going up to Calvary carrying the cross with the crown of thorns, and he's sweating and he's bleeding and he's in terrible shape. And a woman steps out of the crowd with an apron tied around her waist. And she says, Lord, may I mop your brow? And he says, yes. So she takes off her apron and she cleans off his face, and then rolls it up and goes back into the crowd. And later, when she unrolls the apron, it has an imprint of his face on the apron. And Veronika is actually Vera icon, which I believe it's Greek, I think, and it means true image. So Veronika is actually a corruption of Vera icon. So there's this history in Catholicism of the miraculous portrait. I mean, the most famous is the Shroud of Turin, which under endless debate what it is. But it's supposed to be a portrait that, I mean, even like Jesus on a piece of toast, this kind of thing, Mary in the clouds. It's a portrait of a holy figure that appears without human intercession, often in strange places, and is supposed to prove their existence and their holiness. So I was thinking about these and what is a Vera icon to me now. And so I was thinking about x-rays and CAT scans and thinking, okay, they also appear without seemingly human intercession. The image itself is not created by the work of one's hand. They're mysterious the way a Vera icon is. They need interpretation, same thing. And they're often done at times of extreme duress, again, with the Vera icon. So I wanted to do the full image. If you open up to the frontispiece, the full image of the cover is the first image in the book. So you see the entire thing, which is an x-ray of my spine, occluding my face. And I think my arms are wrapped against my body, and I'm wearing a red sweater. So the feathers falling are part of, one of these sort of miraculous manifestations. So to me, the Vera icon of me is my spine more than my face. So yes, it's called Blue Veronika.
Yes, thank you, Jen, for including that in the chat. And thank you, Riva, for offering such a wonderful and deep, analogy. I'm a little bit familiar with Saint Veronika, so I loved hearing, your interpretation and how you incorporated that into your book. I thought that was so lovely that you incorporated that into that portrait and how deep and profound that story was. So just want to take a moment and just so that we can all sit in that and reflect on that a little bit before moving on. So I know we're also nearing 1 o'clock to our end time when we were going to do our Q&A. So I thought perhaps we could maybe delve into one last topic of discussion, Riva, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I I would really, I know a lot of us have really been informed of your advocacy work, in our community, and we were all curious about what has your experience been like in building and sustaining community. That's something that's been really big at Molloy as well, but also importantly, sustaining community for yourself, most of all.
It's a big question. I'm not sure I can really answer it in 5 minutes.
That's okay.
I'm trying to think of how to. I mean, I think when I read memoirs or articles by people who live in what is defined in a non-normative body or non-normative space, there is this arc of, I feel alone, I'm the only person like me, the world seems to hate me, I don't know what I'm supposed to be. I mean, whether it's about being queer or being from country of origin other than the US, or God, anything, you name it. I mean, there's Andrew Solomon's theory of identity, horizontal and vertical identity. And vertical identity is all the stuff you inherit. So what you look like, your religion, your original family politics, family culture, foods, relationship, like all the things that come down to you sort of literally through your immediate community. And if you are not perfectly fitting within that sort of vertical pipe, and something throws you clear of that pipe, then you go looking horizontally for people like you or a space, that makes sense to you. And that's horizontal identity. So disabled people, queer people, people who might be from a racial or a country of origin genesis that is unlike your family of origin. People go looking. And the arc of the story is almost always, I felt alone, I felt despised, I felt confused. I went off and I found my community, and that saved me. I certainly didn't know that when I was in my 30s. I was trying very hard to avoid. I didn't know that there was a community of disabled people that I wanted to have anything to do with at all. It just seemed like, let's go hang out with the lepers. Yay. And luckily, I met Susan Nussbaum, the extremely late lamented Susan Nussbaum, who taught literally dragged me to this meeting of amazing, funny, conceptually radical disabled people. And what I needed was not just a community of disabled people. I could have found that. What I needed was a community that could give me orientation and language and theory. So, because I'd had those things in the lesbian community, in the arts community, I've always sort of understood myself, I guess, intellectually first, and then my aesthetics kind of descend from there. It doesn't look like it. People think that I'm, I won't rant about that, rant for another time. But I think I'm not unusual in needing that arc, but different people's communities are easier to find or harder to find. And then I spent years fostering community by becoming a curator and trying to bring together other artists with disabilities in a way that made sure that their work was being displayed in an analogous way with other people with art careers instead of in a therapeutic context.
Thank you so much, Riva, for sharing more about your experience with us. And I know it's such a big question, so thank you for thank you for giving a wonderful answer to such a big question.